Large cappuccino. Orders up.
Welcome back to the Athlete Cafe. I'm Michael, Francis here, Kylene. We got some good, exciting topics today. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good. Happy Friday.
Yes. Happy
Indeed.
fall weather is
Oh
upon
my
us
gosh,
now,
I
so that's
know.
exciting.
Any fun fall activities that you guys are planning this month?
Getting the last couple rounds of golf in that I can. It's
Ooh.
not really fall activities, but like trying to
Extend
stretch
the
it as
summer.
long as I can. Yeah.
fair.
Nice.
Yeah. Hopefully get into some haunted houses.
Ooh.
Those are my favorite things about fall season.
Nice.
So I like the scary stuff. I know Coach Braden does not.
I'm not a fan of that either, but I know Halloween weekends are on at Cedar Point too, so
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are
Yeah.
heading down
Yeah.
for those.
I don't do roller coasters. Corn mazes, pumpkin patches, more the basic type stuff. I think that's my cup of tea there.
That's fair. Well, all of it's fun. I like fall. It's a
Yeah.
good time.
Good weather,
Yeah.
good flannel season,
Oh,
Vest
yes.
season in the
Vest-
office.
Vest season in the office. It's all back.
Man. Yeah.
All back. So, yeah. Wow.
Well, today we got a pretty cool episode. I know we've probably kind of mentioned it in a little bit in some other episodes, but we wanted to take today to kind of really hammer out the full in-depth about routines and how routines look for athletes before games, during games, after games, just kind of that whole aspect of what you can do to help mentally and physically prepare yourself. So yeah, I think I guess starting with before games, we'll go in chronological order.
Makes sense.
But pregame routines is something that I feel like a lot of my athletes like always bring up or ask about, or they kind of already have an idea of what they do already, but it's always like a conversation starter with a lot of my athletes. And so we talk about like how you physically warm up for your games. You also have to mentally kind of warm up for your games. And I know a lot of athletes, typically that looks like listening to music before or like getting hyped up with their teammates, however that looks, but finding a way to kind of structure that and what that looks like. But how did you guys kind of mentally warm up, or how do you guys talk about that?
Yeah, I think the cool thing with routines first is the fact that it's like all about building a lot of confidence. I think that's what routines kind of allow us to do, and having them. Everyone has a pregame routine. I think that's the first thing I always address and say with the athlete, like it's built in. But I think eventually when we get later into our conversation today about like during the game having routines, and then post game you have a little bit of routine, whether you think about it like that or not, but you do. But I think the big thing especially is like everyone's focused on this pregame routine. So that's why I'm excited to get in the conversation with that, because a lot of times, especially pregame, you are just thinking about it physically, or you just do it with your team, right? If you're doing a team sport, or there's even an individual sport like me with tennis, we still had our like team warm up where we'd hit and stretch and do all that stuff. So I think it's you do some of it, but I think building it out a lot more is what I like to really do. And I think that just for me was always a big confidence booster for having a really good routine and like feeling like you're prepped and ready to go, feeling physically good, feeling mentally good. And I think for me, like I said, everyone has that physical thing. It's about building, like we're going to obviously talk about the more mental piece of it. Like, are you doing some sort of visualization to like see yourself being successful? And for me, like pre-game, it really starts the night before with getting a good sleep, getting a good meal and dinner, carb load for good old races and tennis matches.
Oh yeah.
And hydration. Our coaches always say it starts the night before. Like start getting hydrated then for tomorrow. So.
Yeah, that's how I kind of like to start that conversation with my athletes too, is like just breaking it down, right? Because when we start a pregame routine and we start trying to think about it, it's like kind of like, where do we start? One of those things where like we might already do things we don't already know. So like Michael said, like just breaking it down. So what do we need to do the night before, and then like segmenting it from there. So then what do we do the morning of? What do we do at home? What do we do on the car ride or the bus ride there? And then what about once we get to wherever we're competing, the rink, the field, whatever it is, and then like immediately pregame, and just kind of having like the step-by-step thing and like knowing what you need in each of those moments. Just makes it feel a lot more manageable and intentional, I think, too, just being able to break it down like that.
for sure. Yeah. That's also how I kind of like structure it out too. I'm like all the way back to the beginning. What are you doing the night before? And like going from there, like step by step. What are you eating in the morning? Like what does the car ride? Is it 30 minutes? Is it a 5-minute car ride? Like going through all of those details helps you kind of what Michael said, like visualize even like through your pre-game routines and what you're doing there. So, but yeah, I know you kind of also mentioned like a packing list too, and how that kind of looks.
Yes. Yeah. It's for me. It's all about preparing to or failing to plan and prepare is planning to fail. And one of the things doing tennis lessons growing up, to get from the like, I forget the exact colors, so I like to get from like the green tape they would put like the green level to the blue level, like they just put blue tape on your tennis racket. You had to know how to pack a tennis bag for a tournament, and all the things you need: change of clothes, sunscreen, extra socks, shoes. Every tennis player knows you need at least 2 rackets just in case the strings break on your first one. So just packing everything possible. And then when I eventually taught tennis and instructed and then coached for a year during my master's program, I was like, okay, like what do you guys do to pack? I said to the tennis team we're working with, what do you guys do to like pack? And they're like, what do you mean? I go, what do you like? How do you pack a tournament bag? I was like, that's as simple. I learned this when I was 11. This, what do you mean? Oh man, that's like. But I was just. Then we went through it, and I was like, you guys need to pack. Like, you can pack your homework, and they're like, oh, we can do that. I go, I mean, yeah.
You might want to do that.
Pack this, pack whatever you need, pack extra toiletries, whatever. What you're going away, like, and if you don't have something, or you're like, maybe your shirt got ripped and you need to change out of it 'cause it's, I don't know, the uniform violation, like then you need to have this extra stuff prepped and ready to go, extra rackets, extra grips, because it's just going to take you out of it, right? That's my thing. Like if you're missing something, like, oh my gosh, I forgot this, you're stressing yourself out for no reason. So packing's important. Do it the night before. One of my friends is an Eagle Scout, so he'd always be like, he's always prepared for everything. Like always packed, prepared. He knows. Yeah. So
I had like a similar kind of routine to like packing like your tennis bag when I played hockey. Like hockey, you have a ton of equipment and you need all of it, right? So whenever I would pack my bag, I would start with whatever I put on last, and then I would work my way down to what I put on first, what's on the top of my bag. So it'd be like helmet and gloves, jersey in the bottom, and then like elbow pads, shoulder pads, and just work my way up. So that way I also made sure that I had everything, because you never wanted to be the player that got to the rink and, oh, I'm missing an elbow pad or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I'll never forget in college, one of our games, it was an away game, and the way our locker room was, we had like our stalls were kind of divided, so we had like a cubby in the bench, and then we had like a little locker above, so we could kind of split up our equipment and lock it away if anybody else needed to use it. And we were at an away game, and one of the girls in our team forgot the entire top half of her cubby. So come game time, she didn't have her equipment. Luckily, one of the girls that was scratched and wasn't supposed to play had her bag just in case somebody got hurt. And then she forgot her stuff, so the girl that wasn't supposed to play got to play. And the girl that forgot her stuff didn't. And obviously, you never do that on purpose. It happens. Maybe something was going on and she just forgot. But the importance of having routines and having a way that we pack our bag to avoid stuff like that from happening is critical, I guess.
And it's funny because with running, I mean, you don't really need a lot. You need your spikes and your uniform. That's pretty much it. But even like when it came to packing, like those were always like the last things that I would put on, so that they're on top, or like they'd be in like my travel backpack, so that anytime that in college, like we were traveling like across states or getting on a plane or something, like I wanted those with me so that I know if I lost everything else in my luggage, at least when I'd get there, I can still run and compete because I have my uniform and my spikes. So
it's another good way of phrasing it. Like if you have to travel, like, the whole, check bag versus carry-on bag situation. It's a good point. Have the stuff have the necessities with you at all times, right? Always be ready with that stuff, because I think that's that could happen. That has happened to people.
It has.
And once again, it just makes you panic, right? And you hope that there's extras, or even for me, I remember watching on Netflix, it was the coach's like rules for the coach's playbook, like rules for life. And it was the Dawn Staley episode. And she said one of her life lessons was like, bring your own ball. And like the whole message was about just like, you're the one that's like responsible for this stuff. And if you want to be involved, if you want to do something, you need to have the necessary things. So she didn't used to be able to get to like play in the neighborhood court because, you don't have your own ball. So she started bringing it. And then guess what? People have to play. They have to rely on her to play. And that was something too, is like, pack your own snacks. Don't rely on other people, right? It's nice to rely on people. It's nice to have the support. It's good to have that in place. But like, if you're not packing your own snacks or water, you're relying on someone else or other people to bring that for you, right? You're failing to kind of prepare and have that good routine.
And then who knows what you're going to have, right? If you need something, it's grabbing something greasy crazy from the concession stand because you need something and that's all you can find. So just preparing as best as you can.
Yeah, and that starts the night before. But yeah, I think it's also I met with one of my athletes this week, and she was all throughout the week, like she was mentally preparing, doing visualizing and all of these other things, and she had her night before, and she goes into it Saturday morning for a cross country race, and she is under the impression that she's running at a certain later time, and then coach comes up to her and tells her that you're running in 45 minutes. Oof. So I know I know that happens, not often, but it does happen for a lot of athletes. So how would you guys go about like that routine piece, but if you have to kind of like shrink it a little bit?
Michael?
Yeah, we talked about this in our production meeting. Is that what we can call it, our podcast meeting? Yeah, it's a cool point. We do a lot of, all of us up here have done a lot of different sports, and I think we all have had different moments where, you've had very little time to prepare and then maybe way too much time to prepare. And once again, I think preparing for these scenarios is super important, right? Like your teammate might not have been prepared, but luckily another one was, and then you can get ready, because it's probably also a timing thing. Like you get to the rink late, you might have a doctor's appointment, your parents are driving you, you're not on the team bus, or vice versa, you hit traffic. There's so many different things. So once again, to not hit the panic button or avoid hitting the panic button, what I always talk about with my athletes, at least, is this idea of a shrunken and stretched out routine plan. So like you have one, your main one. So if it takes you like, let's say 30 minutes, which is great, you do these like 10 things, and like that, you do that within that 30-minute time frame. That's really good. Whether it's like check in, like start stretching, warming up, go for a jog, water, snack, listen to music, whatever that is. And then there's a time in high school, luckily in the state of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the country, I got to do 2 sports my senior year, spring season, the first time they like brought the rule back. So there was only one time where there was a tennis match and a track meet on the same day. So after school,
I'd be stressed already.
It was already, we were prepared though. My dad was like, we're going to do this, we're going to leave. It's also one of those things too, where I like tried to tell my teammates too. It's like, it's not like I'm trying to abandon you guys, and they all understood, but like something to also do, important to like check with your teammates and coaches to make sure that this is all right to do, because it might not, or it might rub people the wrong way. So making sure that you're being good, as I was captain, and making sure that like all the guys were good with it. But I played my match, and I had an hour and a half tomorrow. Got extra hitting in, got extra stretching in, extra running in, got to do all this stuff, and then we were also waiting because the other team was late, which was annoying, but they got there finally, and I got to play my tennis match, and we did lose, unfortunately. But it's not like I was losing intentionally. That's not what I'm trying to say. We lost close sets. And then I was like, all right. And then I said bye to everyone quick, checked on other matches, and then we're driving. We're driving across the state, luckily. Like I said, Rhode Island's small. 35 minutes, 35 to Coventry to run, and I had 5 minutes. I literally was getting out of the car, man. My dad's basically driving through the track to get me to the track.
Yikes.
Like, you gotta do what
as close as you can possibly get me to the gate. I'm there. My race is on in 5 minutes, and my coaches are stressing out. They're like texting. They're like trying to call my dad. Like, is he gonna be there? And it's like we're like this far out, and I was needed that day. It was one of the more competitive like dual meets that we had, and it was I was like, all right, well, luckily I warmed up before and already played. So for me, it was just, I needed to like just do some like very light stretching, mostly like calves, quads, do a couple sprints, and then talk to my coach. The only 3 things I needed to do. I was like, all right, what's the game plan? She's like, I need you to win the race, lad. And I was like, all
right.
Right, simple. I can just run really fast after I just played a hour and a half tennis match. But it all worked out. I did win. I did accomplish the goal that was set out for me, I guess, in a way. But having that shrunken and stretched plan was so crucial, because I could have gotten there and just been so stressed and not prepared to run, or maybe I don't know what to do. I have no time to run. And, luckily that's why I was at least the bare minimum, probably the only thing I needed to do, because I was already warm still, was talk to my coach and get my head right, which was good, I think.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a pretty difficult situation too, going from one sport to the next. And so I know there's a lot of athletes that are dual sport athletes, and sometimes your seasons overlap like that, and you have days like that. And so from going from one mindset with one game or competition to the next, can be kind of difficult. So being able to prepare for those moments, obviously you knew ahead of time that, this tennis match and this race is going to be on the same day. So a couple days out, you can kind of prepare and plan for that. But when you're in situations like that too, even with running or swimming, when you have multiple events or multiple days that you're kind of competing, I know there were definitely times where I'd get off the track from my 400, and then 10 minutes later I got to be back on for a 200 race, depending on how the meet ran. So it's good to know that your body at that point is already physically warmed up, because you've done something that day already. And so it's really just about adjusting the gears and adjusting okay, what's the focus, what am I trying to accomplish this next time, and then getting mentally ready that way. So
yeah, I think that's a great point. And thinking about that from tournament structures too, for other sports, right? Baseball, softball, hockey, sometimes we'll have 4 or 5 hours between games. Sometimes we'll have an hour, sometimes it's 30 minutes. So like you said, being able to adjust that routine and just figuring out what's the most important thing that I need to do to get ready for this game, and how much time do I have to do it, and how can I make that work? Because sometimes the game before you goes a little bit longer, sometimes it ends early, so you just really have to be able to get ready when you need it. And one of the conversations that I've actually been having a lot with some of the hockey players I've been working with is, when we have long breaks between games in tournaments, how do we make sure that we're putting ourselves in a good position to rest and recover and be ready to go, right? So that doesn't always mean going to the mall and shopping with mom and dad for 5 hours, or running around the hotel, or going swimming, or doing all of these things that are just going to drain you because you still have another game at the end of the night. So it feels like you have all this time, and sure, it's fun, it's part of the tournament thing to do all of that stuff, but also prioritizing things, right? You're here for your sport, you're here for this. Yeah, we're going to have fun and going to go out to eat and do whatever, but what do I also need to be able to perform in that next game, because that's the reason why we're here. So
yeah,
I think a really cool point too, that you just thought of it when you were talking through that, is read the rule books. I had a conversation with this about my with one of my athletes the other day, a tennis player, and they were at a tournament, and their first match they got a walkover, so the person didn't show up, I think, so they got that win for free basically, and they moved on to the next round, and they won that match, and then they had another round right after that, but they wanted to put them on 10 minutes after or something, or really quick in between. And in the rule book, there's a certain amount of time that you are allotted to have between things. So if it's in there, make sure you read it's not the most attractive or fun thing to do in the world, right? Read the rules, but read the rule book, you get some sort of, advantage out of that, or just knowing that you're I'm exhausted, I'm allowed to have these 15 minutes, and then you can prepare and use those routines that you need to, and adjust accordingly as well.
But I think probably my last point, when it comes to pregame routines, it's great to have routines, but I think sometimes athletes get that mixed up with rituals and being superstitious about certain things.
Especially this time of year, spooky superstitions. Goodness.
But I mean, even with myself, like when I was running, I'd have my lucky pair of socks that I'd wear. I know it's controversial to wear socks with spikes because a lot of people don't wear socks with spikes, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Did you wash the socks?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, some people don't. I do know that.
Yeah, what do you mean?
But I would always feel like slightly off if I didn't have like that ritual piece or like something like a lucky item or something like that. Like, and so I think for a lot of athletes that might be a struggle in their routine if they're always used to doing something or having something specific, but then you get to certain games, certain tournaments where you don't have it or you can't do it, and then you kind of like feel off.
Yep.
And
I'm going to lose now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
I don't have the lucky pennies in my shoes. Or I had an athlete that said their field hockey team, they would pass the ball around a circle with their sticks. They didn't do that. They weren't going to win. And I was like, what?
Because that's how that
played yet.
works.
but even I've heard a lot of times too, like when you have a bad warm up, you automatically think like, oh, okay, like the game's gonna go horrible today, or I feel off, I feel wrong. And I could counteract that with
Yeah,
all of my
counter that.
Sorry,
No, so you guys said it right. You gotta like
all of my best races, I've had my worst warm ups
Yep.
with, and so. All of those like specific things that you feel like you need, or all of those physical things that you're trying to do every little thing with your routine, it's great when you have it, but to also know like your talent doesn't disappear if it doesn't go exactly the way it's supposed to. And to understand like there's only so many things you can control about your routine.
yeah.
But
I always like that point because I also then say like, oh, good. Like if I had a bad warm up, I'd be like, oh, good. I got all the bad stuff out of the way. It's all gone now. It's there, and it's not going to carry over. It probably still did, but it's not going to. That's what I would think.
mindset.
For me, mindset. For me, it was all about, I remember watching one of these really talented squash players that I was working with, and I was like, you do all this stuff. I noticed, like before you went to the court, you like do this, bounce this certain amount of times each time, and it's like, yeah, I need to do that. Like it's my ritual, and I was like. No, I don't like the word. I don't like the word ritual. I was like, it's your routine. Like you do that every single time. It's ingrained. It's part of you, and you have complete control over it. That's the thing I think that I dislike with the word ritual. It's like the rituals have control over you. If you forget to do them, then they kind of win. Your routines you have control over. You can change them over time. You can add things, take things out, and that's why it's I think also important to have that like shrunken and stretched version because I think that just helps physically and mentally with people. And for me, it's just controlling the controllable type of thing. But routines, we have control over. Rituals have control over us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think all of that stuff that we talked about is great and like why it's important and all of that. But I think like athletes listening, maybe if you're like, okay, that's all great, but like, how do I start? Like now what? Like, how do I create my routine? Some tips, I think we've all kind of used similar strategies. One of them is like thinking about the best game you've ever played, the worst game you've ever played, and like what did you do leading up to both of those games? So how can we do more of the good stuff that led to the good game, and what do we need to avoid that led to maybe a bad game, right? And like obviously not thinking too far into it of like, oh my gosh, this happened, I can never do that again because it was a bad game. But just gaining some insight to kind of where we're at, what do we need physically, mentally, focus wise in order to prepare is just a really good starting point for kind of coming up with that and building your routine.
Yeah, thinking about that best game, best performance, and it's like, okay, what did I do leading up to that? It's a good place to start, like you said. But yeah, and I think as I've said in the beginning too, like there's more than just pre-game routines. There's also routines that happen. Well, there's also routines that happen during games. But I think those look a little bit different too, because obviously you don't always have a lot of time, depending on the sport that you play. And so one of the things that I probably gets brought up the most with my athletes is when it comes to during the game having like a routine to get over mistakes or to get past mistakes. And so I know we have like a couple tips that we usually talk about when it comes to coping with mistakes, but I think my favorite mental routine or something that you can kind of do to mentally get over mistakes is something that we call flush it. But it's kind of like a symbolic gesture that you do to quickly like remind yourself to move past it, like just that reminder of, hey, it happened, cool, next thing. And so like an example of that with one of my basketball athletes is every time like he would make a mistake in a game, he'd wipe the bottom of his shoe. So that looks pretty natural to anybody watching the game or anybody in the crowd. Like that is just something that kind of happens in the sport. But for him, he took that action as, I made a mistake, let me just wipe it away and on to the next thing. And so like that's something quick that you can do in games to kind of help cope with those mistakes. But
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversations that I have with my athletes are kind of similar too, of like having something to go to in that moment and something that's intentional. So whether it's super simple, like wiping your shoes, or the way that we look at it sometimes is having like our reset routine. So we recognize the mistake, we release the mistake, and then we refocus. So it's recognize, release, refocus. So we recognize it, so we're allowed to think about what we did, right? We don't have to figure it out, but we can recognize what happened. We can release it somehow. So maybe that's wiping our shoes, and then, or taking a deep breath, whatever it is, letting it out. And then what do I need to do to refocus and get back in the moment and move on to the next important thing? So
yeah. And that kind of goes along with like the idea of like almost parking the mistake, like that letting it go, where you mentally just kind of put it somewhere else off to the side. It's not something that you're going to dissect and like think about in the middle of a soccer game when the play's still going on, but it's something that you can, however you want to do it, but mentally just put that off to the side and find a way to like refocus. What's the next thing you have to do, or what's the next play? So yeah.
I think the really fascinating thing with like the during the competition routines compared to the pregame and the postgame, which we'll get to, is like pregame and postgame are, I think, the same thing almost universally. Like it's the same kind of things that we need and ideas, you know. And like pregame, it's, you know, eat and hydrate and stretch and, you know, start getting loose and get the heart rate up. Postgame, it's get the heart rate lower, but still do the same thing, stretch, ice, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
During, I think it really changes a lot based on the sport. And I think that's the kind of tough thing, I think, for a lot of athletes. If you're out there and you're like, what can I do to like help myself stay more mentally locked in or more focused? I had a new great super cringy word, Locktober, right? How do you stay Locktober? How do you stay locked in during the month of October? Well, not really, but in all the months too. But it's like, how do I stay locked in with the sport that I'm doing, and like what can I do during it? Like, yeah, we do this stuff beforehand. I warm up with my team. I do this stuff after. We decompress. We talk about what happened. We do some stretching. What can you do during? And I think a lot of times with me, especially with the tennis athletes I work with, is what do you do in between points? The point ends, and that like we're very focused in when we're in the rally and trying to hit the ball back and forth. Hopefully, at least we're focused in there. And then it's like it ends, and then usually you're either happy because you just won the point, or you're pissed off because you just lost it.
Yeah.
So usually I was like, so what do you do in between the points? And I'm thinking, or you think too far ahead, like. Every tennis player in the world, I always go the same scenario. It's like, you're thinking you're up 3-all and you're serving, and then you thought through this whole thing already, like, oh, I won this game, I'm up 4-3, I can break this guy, I'm up 5-3, and then I can hold again and win the set 6-3, and then you booking yourself in set number 2 when it's still 3-all and you're still in the first set. So to really stay focused, to stay locked in, Locktober.
That is cringy. It's getting cringier the more you say it, but okay, continue.
Is to develop what I like to call like an in-between point routine. And like I said, it's very sport specific. A lot of these different ones I think that we're going to talk through are going to be sport specific, but for, tennis players, and you can try to apply it for other sports too, maybe during timeouts, but in between the point, right? When the point ends, we always talk about like, all right, if you win the point, positive body language response, or just saying positive self-talk statements like, I got this, come on, let's go. What you hear on a tennis court a lot of times, or giving yourself that fist pump, like, all right, that was good, like rewarding the good behavior basically, right? And then when you mess up or miss, or they hit a winner on you, it's this instructional kind of self-talk, trying to get out of that negative state of mind, just be like, all right, I just needed to, whip up on the ball a little bit more. I didn't hit that very cleanly. And, that way it's still positive and moving forward. And then from there, it's, breathe. Right? And all that stuff about breathing that we probably have talked about on all these podcasts, right? Take a deep breath, come up with a game plan. Like, what are you going to do with this next serve or return or this next few shots? What are you trying to do from maybe a tactical standpoint? What's the game plan you need to execute? and then just go out there and do it. The Nike motto, just do it,
Just do
execute,
Something like
and
that.
it's so simple. It takes 50, you have little time in between these things. That's like a 15 to 20 second, type of routine that you want to get it to. And then you play at the next point. And I guarantee you start doing that and you do it consistently, you will feel so much better and you'll feel way more locked in on the tennis match and focused.
And I like that it's, because I know I've talked about like coping with mistakes. So when something negative happens, how are you gonna what's your routine to refocus and get out of that? But I like that also incorporates like positive behavior or things that went well, and you kind of like reward yourself with something, because that's going to be crucial in every sport, to not just recognize when things are going wrong, but recognize when things are going right too, and to intentionally, like, however it is, give yourself a pat on the back like for that. But yeah, I think it looks different in every sport too, because when it comes to maybe soccer or basketball, when you have halftime or every quarter, like you can kind of you might have a little more time there, but you can kind of use like that same idea of, okay, what went well in this first half or in this first quarter, and what am I going to work on? How can I pressure the other team, or whatever that kind of looks like. So
Yeah, and then other sports too, thinking about it, like with hockey, we have between period, right? So we have quick recovery and then more time to recover. And then baseball, softball, we have our pre-pitch routine in the field, right? So thinking about, if the ball hits me, where am I going? Or what do I think the pitcher's going to throw? What teammates do I need to be communicating with? So that's like fielding, and then our pre-bat routine as well, right?
Yeah.
So from when I get in the dugout to when I'm in the on-deck circle to when I'm walking towards the batter's box to then stepping in the batter's box, and then between each pitch while I'm in my at-bat. And it doesn't have to be a set routine, anything crazy for each of those moments, but just be intentional with what you're doing in that time to put yourself in the best spot to be able to perform, feel good, feel relaxed, and just feel in control of that moment as much as you can.
Yeah. That's the during part's tough because it's all based on time, and even like you have in between innings. I just went through like a visualization script with my one of the baseball players I was working with the other day, and it was cool because he's like, yeah, like I do this and then I take a step back, like take a deep breath, and then I get back in and I'm like, this is the pitch that I'm looking for. If I see it, swing on it. And I was like, that's awesome. And then like does that every single time. It was cool just to kind of see and hear how he kind of approaches that. Like that's his built-in kind of routine during, which was awesome. It's tough though for other sports, like for running. You do sprints, you do hurdles, like 100 meter, like it's just go, right?
So you just go. Nothing happens in the
right.
middle
So
of
it's like, what do you mean during? Like I just have to go fast. But you could say that, you could think that in your head,
Right.
or you could, as you're approaching each hurdle, it could just be like,
like some kind of
step,
keyword
jump,
that you have.
keyword, something like that.
Or if your race is a little bit longer, if you're doing the 800 or the mile, obviously you have more time to like think during those.
For sure. 3K, it's a tough race.
For sure.
Sing a
Your
song
cross
to
country
yourself,
season.
maybe.
I did sing songs to myself when I'd run the 3K,
Yes.
and it was one song that I would sing twice, and then the race would be over. And,
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to share the song, but I guess I will. It was the Pina Colada song. It was
Oh
Escape.
my gosh, that's crazy.
By the time I sang it twice, race was usually done. Good to go.
Yeah. But I think everyone kind of comes up with, when it comes to running or swimming, where it is like just one event and you just kind of go and it's over. You kind of come up with your own ways to get through that. And not really routines wise, but I know with all of my runners, I really talk about like having a race strategy so that they have things to focus on when they are running longer races and doing that. But then that kind of gets into, if we're talking about track and swimming, that kind of gets to like post routines too, because when you have multiple events throughout the day, or a swim meet could be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you have multiple events. You have prelims in the morning, finals in the afternoon, and then each day you have the same thing, prelims in the morning, finals in the afternoon. So you have a lot of different times where you have to process the race that just happened and focus on the next thing that you have to do. Or when the day's over, process how the day went and focus on, okay, what do I need to do tonight to feel good for Saturday? What do I need to do Saturday night after having 2 days of competitions to feel good for Sunday? So that kind of gets into some of like the post routines. And I think the biggest thing that I talk about with that is that process kind of mindset of
That's what I was going to ask you. How do you process through that stuff?
Yeah, I usually I try to keep it to something short and sweet, especially if you're at a meet and you're kind of like trying to do in between events kind of thing. Identifying what went well, something positive that you did, and then identifying what you can improve on, especially if you're in that prelims to final kind of phase where you made finals. It's like, okay, cool, what was good about prelims? What do you need to improve on? All right, focus on your 200 or focus on the 500 race, whatever it is. And so that's kind of like a short and sweet kind of processing routine that you can have for sports like that.
Yeah, I do something similar. I think it works better for sports that are a little bit longer, right, that have a little bit more going on, where we can really dissect a game if we want to. But that's not always the best thing, because then we start to spiral, then we have a hard time wrapping it up, moving on with our day, right? So it's the same kind of idea, but we call it like our 3-2-1 post game. So it's like, what are 3 things I did well, 2 things I learned, and then 1 goal for the next game. But the thing that I really like about that is we're picking out more positives from our game than anything else. Because I think a lot of the time athletes finish a game, and whether you won or lost or whatever happens, the first thing we go to is, oh, I should have made this play. Oh, I should have done that. Like all of those negatives. And then we also have a lot of athletes that struggle with confidence and struggle with trusting themselves, right? So if we can start building those like confidence steps and those positive outlooks on our game and our post-game routine, it's just going to have like a snowball effect almost into the way that we think about our game. If we're able to routinely pick out those positive things, and maybe that'll become the first thing that we go to instead of all those negatives.
Yeah, and like with some of my athletes that I've been working for, like for months, or I know I've been seeing some of them on and off for like over a year, in season and not off season, but whatever. But like those athletes that I've been talking to for a long time, now when we talk about like their meets or their competitions, and they're explaining to me like what happened, they always like start with that positive thing, because they know it's something that I'm going to ask, and so they're always like, well,
now.
yeah, it's ingrained.
It's like routine.
It's a routine. But that's so cool to like see that transition with my athletes. Like you get to that point, and now just talking about it, you're able to easily pick out like those positive things.
Yeah, I think a big thing that Kylene said is, for me, like having this good preparation, that's one of like the big foundations of like confidence. That's why confidence is so complex. And like one of the ways, if you want to be confident, is to, you know, build out a pregame routine, have something during that can keep you engaged and locked in. And then also afterwards, like, what do you do? And that's something I always ask in like one of the first few sessions when I meet with anyone. I was like, what's your post-game routine? And they're like, what? And I can be like, at 3 heads. And I was like, that's the thing. I was like, oh, I was like, you already do stuff for it. And they're like, whoa, what do you mean, man? I don't want to do this anymore, mom and dad. I don't want to do this. It's weird. But it's just, it's you go in the car ride, you debrief it, or on the team bus ride back, or plane ride, I guess, too, for some of us. Must be nice. Anyway, but you know, on the ride back, but you also shower, or hopefully you're showering. You should definitely shower after you compete, please. You know,
you eat something.
You're hydrating still. You know, maybe you stretch out, you foam roll. You can add all these different things too that are out there now. PT, ice baths, saunas. There's so many things now. Compression boots. There's so many different things out there. Theraguns. You know, there's like 8 million different things that help with recovery now. I think it's like LeBron James spends some, you know, insane amount of money. I forget it. Not insane even. That's actually a good amount of money for his body, right? He puts in all this time for recovery, and I think Novak Djokovic, best tennis player in the world, has like this egg pod thing that he goes in for recovery. One of the pods. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do. Those are some extremes. I think at the very, you know, base level, what people do, you still eat, you hydrate, you shower, you know, and you can, you know, stretch a little bit afterwards. And if you do that, that's a very good post-game routine, and you're treating your body well. And even though you may not feel like it, you don't need to yet. You do. It's just helping yourself for the next time you go out there and compete, and helping your body relax, because the toughest thing, like you guys have said, is to decompress and process through these things. And your body's still very awake and alert, and you obviously probably are tired and you want to go to bed. So getting to relax your body faster will help you to also probably most likely fall asleep faster too.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely. And then I know, like, I have a lot of athletes too that like maybe they do all that, but they still have a hard time like not letting that game affect the rest of the night, right? Like they continue thinking about it. Maybe their parents keep asking about it. Like they do all these things physically, but then it's like mentally, how do I shut that off? So if we can kind of pair that physical stuff with our mental post-game breakdown, whatever it is, it helps us kind of set that boundary of like, okay, when I'm done all of these things, that game is done and I'm ready to move on to whatever I have for the rest of my day.
If you do the same thing, after like a win or a loss too, like it's just a part of it. It's like, oh, I do this. I sit down. Did I hit my goals or not? Did I, how can I picture myself, maybe doing better the next time? And then maybe I write it out. I journal it. I put it in a post-performance log. And then it's good. It's done. It's parked. I think we said it for last month too, but like parking it again, like just being like, all right, it's there. And if I want to come back to it the next day, I can. If not, like I did everything that I normally do for it, and creating that is good.
Yeah, and I think like the only other thing, like off of what Kylene said, like if you're really struggling with like that mental side of like just being able to like get it out and leave it behind, something that one of our other coaches too, Abby, kind of talks about is having like a pity party, but like a 24-hour pity party. So this is like after your tournament, after like whatever it is, giving yourself an allotted amount of time where you can mentally process everything. So you can go through the things that sucked about it. You can start to get to that point where, okay, well, some of it was good, some of it was okay, right? But you give yourself like that 24 hours, and then at that time you need to like let it out of your system, however that looks. If it's like venting about it one last time and being like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it again. If it's journaling it, if it's however you want to do it. But I think sometimes that also helps athletes, especially if they're coming off of particularly like
a season ending.
Season ending, or like something like that is really hard to move past.
You're allowed to be sad about it.
Yes.
For sure.
But having like these routines after games, whatever that looks like for you, is going to help you physically and mentally, again, like refocus and get back to it on Monday or whatever that is. But yeah, so I think we kind of got through everything with pre-game, during game, and after game routines. Hopefully that kind of gives you guys some ideas or just a general look at what those routines can kind of look like and what they would look like for your sport, because I know we mentioned a lot of different sports and how these look for that. So hopefully you guys have a better understanding of what your routines can look like. And like we said before, you're probably already doing half of these things, but now you want to structure it and be intentional with what you're doing. And so, if you guys have any questions too, feel free to leave comments or reach out to us, and we'd be happy to answer. But I think that's it for today.
Big wild world of routines.
Yeah. All right. So
Locktober.
We will. We'll catch you next time. All right.
Happy Locktober.
Locktober. Oh, man.
If you like what you're listening to, be sure to follow the Athlete Cafe on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. You can find us wherever you enjoy listening to your podcasts.